Was that about ice or what the fuck? No way!
What's burning?
August 31st. This is a sensation. Russia's loudest emergency. Over Moscow, air defense mistakenly attacked a passenger plane, flight Minsk-Moscow. The pilot's last words, "We're on fire. Our own are shooting us down."
Pilot of the aircraft on the line. I repeat, civilian route. Permission confirmed. We're being targeted by air defense. I repeat, air defense is firing at a civilian aircraft.
The Russian plane ended up in the skies over the Moscow region. A Pantsir missile mistook it for an enemy drone. The explosion occurred at around 12:20 a.m. during the approach to Sheremetyevo.
This is not a target. There are people here. I repeat, a civilian aircraft was mistaken for a UAV. Record this. Altitude maintained. Route approved. We are under heavy fire.
New secret information has surfaced. At the Ministry of Murder, there is panic. Military communications are down. Was this Putin's order or a system failure?
It probably overheated. Sensational. Russian air defense attacked a passenger plane on the Minsk-Moscow route. This is the most high-profile incident of the night. New details have emerged. The Pantsir system opened fire right in the sky over the Moscow region. The airliner was mistaken for a drone. The plane was damaged but managed to make it to Sheremetyevo. The pilot's last words, "Our own are shooting us down."
This is the pilot speaking. I repeat, this is a civilian route. Clearance has been confirmed. We are being targeted by air defense. I repeat, air defense is firing at a civilian aircraft. This is not a target. There are people on board. I repeat, the civilian aircraft was mistaken for a UAV.
And this is not an isolated incident. Overnight, there was a wave of explosions and fires across Russia. Russian air defense is now firing on its own. Shells are falling on residential neighborhoods. An apartment building caught fire in the Moscow suburbs. Apartments are burning in Pushkin as well. There were probably only children there. In Penza, there's a fire at the thermal power plant. The city is in blackout, and this is the work of the good Ukrainian drones. The power plant is on fire. That means the substation is there. The Ukrainian armed forces struck the aircraft factory and the plant producing air defense missiles for the occupiers.
There was also a direct hit on the aviation plant where MiGs are assembled.
A lot of them are flying toward the city.
But as I understand it, they have one target, Kronstadt and DMZ.
It hit right in the face there. The second one. Take that, take that.
It's about to blow up. In Dubna, the Kronstadt plant where drones are produced was attacked again. In Tula, a series of strikes hit the design bureau where air defense systems are developed. Strikes have been recorded in Kursk, Tula, Tver, Moscow, the Moscow region, and Dubna. Russia is in a panic. And most importantly, in Belgorod, a Russian air defense missile also hit a residential building. Today is one of the most shameful episodes in the history of Russian air defense. They shot down their own passenger plane. Who gave the order? Why is the air defense operating blindly? And who's next? While Moscow is putting out fires in high-rise buildings, the Pantsir systems are firing indiscriminately into the sky. Today we are joined by the well-known military analyst Colonel Roman Svetan. He will explain how this is even possible, what it means for Putin, for the front, and what will happen next.
Well, after a couple of planes go down from these Pantsirs, believe me, the third one just won't take off. They'll ground them and just sit tight, not daring to go anywhere. First, the Russians really do have a very good army air defense system. That's the Pantsir. There are different versions. The Pantsir 1, Pantsir 2, the second one, they've packed it with 48 missiles. The first one has 12. So it's a decent machine, an excellent machine, but it needs to operate in combat conditions. That is, when you're completely surrounded by enemies everywhere, as they say, that's the kind of environment it operates in. But this is Army air defense, an Army surface-to-air missile system designed to cover troops on the move. Even during an offensive, it's used precisely to provide cover when everything that moves is shot down, because at that point, everything is considered hostile. And these Pantsirs, they're not bad machines, but I'll say it again, they're military systems, and yet they've been deployed at civilian airfields. Only the Russians could come up with something like that. So using such a good machine in this way to destroy any flying object, regardless of its level, including drones, that's the kind of mode they're operating in. It has cannons. Well, the first Pantsir has cannons, and they work pretty well. And it's the same story with the missile. The missile has a range of up to 20 kilometers with an effective radius of 18 to 20 kilometers. It can pretty much take out everything within that area. And so these Pantsirs are deployed by the Russians at airfields, on rooftops, even on the Ministry of Defense building. They've put a Pantsir there. Naturally, if it starts firing in all directions. Let me repeat, it's supposed to operate roughly out in the fields when there's an offensive against the enemy, when it's covering its own troops. But here, they're putting it right in the center of Moscow, on top of a high-rise. So where is it going to shoot? It'll end up firing at the high-rises themselves. Within a 20-kilometer radius of where the Pantsir is stationed, people are bound to have a mental breakdown. That's for sure. It's not just a nervous breakdown, that's 100%, because at any moment a Pantsir missile could end up in your toilet. Just imagine you sit down and suddenly, hello, good evening, we're from Ukraine. That's pretty much exactly how it happened this time, by the way. We had a widespread attack, and I'd say it was problematic in terms of efficiency. Because as we've said many times, what's the point of hitting the Russians from all directions? They still have those same Pantsirs set up and they shoot down most of them. It's better to strike at a single area, but nevertheless, they hit Kronstadt, and this is in Dubna. There's actually a serious facility there. First of all, Dubna is one of Russia's technological centers located north of Moscow. It's about, I think, 100 to 140 kilometers from Moscow. Nevertheless, one of Russia's main nuclear research centers is also located there. You'd still have to fly there and see what they're running in circles, those protons and neutrons. And they're supposed to run them clockwise, not counterclockwise. It's the same situation here. In Dubna and in Kronstadt, they assemble components and units for Russian aviation and rocket technology. That place should have been shut down a long time ago. It would be better if all our drones, for example, targeted Dubna and took out one or another facility there. Both of them need to be taken out. And right now we're talking about a barrage, but still, this barrage strike hit at least a dozen targets. The Russians are definitely having nervous breakdowns, that's for sure. They fired off the same missiles, shot in all directions, even tried to shoot down their own plane, but failed. Just imagine how clumsy they are. They can't even shoot down a civilian plane. Well, I mean, if you look at it from that perspective, obviously there's sarcasm here on one hand, but on the other, it's also an indicator of certain technical capabilities of these types of weapons. And as for whether the Pantsirs will strike civilian targets, they definitely will. That's 100%. As long as they're stationed in residential, in neighborhoods, they're definitely going to hit high-rise buildings. So get ready to take hits from your own side, but they're used to it. Russians are already accustomed to this.
Friends, please like this video. Let us know in the comments what you think about the Pantsir targeting a civilian plane or civilian infrastructure. Once again, this is very important. Russian air defense is firing at its own targets. Everything is falling onto residential apartments. A high-rise caught fire in Moscow suburbs, and in Pushkin, it's burning. A fire at Penza's thermal power plant caused a city blackout. In Belgorod, an air defense missile hit a residential building, and in Dubna, the Kronstadt enterprise where drones are produced was attacked. In Tula, there was a series of strikes on the design bureau where air defense systems are developed. Strikes have been recorded in Kursk, Tver, the Moscow region, and Dubna, and Russia is in a panic. Roman Grigorievich regarding Tula. There, the strike hit the design bureau where air defense systems are developed.
Well, you can still use drones against the design bureau. It's still out in the open, meaning it's not underground. It's not a purely military facility that's buried deep, the kind you can only reach with concrete-piercing warheads or ballistic missiles. But the design bureaus themselves are quite serious. The Russians have design bureaus, including one in Tula, but mainly they're located in the Moscow region, in the Moscow Oblast. Why do I always mention Moscow? Although there is one in Tula, and there are also several design bureaus in a few other cities up to the Urals at least that participate in the development of both aviation and missile technology, and naturally ground-based weapon systems. And now, the main innovative aspects are related to drones, control systems, and new warhead systems. So this is an entire process that needs to be destroyed at its root. Basically, regarding design bureaus, well, it makes sense to use drones. Because after all, how much can a drone carry? Well, 50 kilograms of explosives. It's not going to do anything to a military facility that's buried 3 floors underground. It just won't work. Sometimes a design bureau is located in a penthouse somewhere where the designers like to get some fresh air. And then suddenly a fierce beaver comes flying in and another fierce beaver at the same time. So, from both sides at once. But in reality, of course, it's better to use drones against oil refineries, against the refineries. Believe me, even a single drone, if it gets through and completes its mission, can inflict extremely serious damage. Why is that? Because a refinery is practically ready to burn down. You just need to light the match. And here 50 kilograms of explosives come crashing down on top of it.
Roman Grigorievich regarding Dubna. That's where the Kronstadt enterprise was attacked, where they also manufacture drones. We've talked more than once about the fact that Dubna has nuclear facilities there, yes, nuclear research facilities. But we keep attacking there constantly. How important is it to carry out these strikes? You always say that the strikes need to be effective. So we actually need to almost completely destroy the target. The floor is yours.
Well, you're right. Even though you're a woman, you caught the main idea. Exactly. There's no point in sending our drones if there's no efficiency. So let's say we produced 100 drones. First of all, people chipped in for these drones. They were produced, purchased, and delivered to the troops. After that, target designation takes place. They fly off in all directions, But over there, there's point air defense. The same Pantsir systems are stationed there. So the Pantsir is loaded, let's say, with 12 missiles. So if you send a 13th drone, it will get through and complete its mission. And the first 12, the Pantsir will shoot down. Or, well, it will shoot down however many it can. That's why it makes no sense to just send drones in all directions like a fan 5 for each Pantsir. Well, they'll just shoot them down. What's the efficiency in that? So when there's no efficiency, the question arises, is this just the disposal of drones then? I've already explained it in simple terms. That's how every air defense system works. There's what's called the saturation coefficient of the system. So to exceed this saturation coefficient at a single point, you need to send more drones. About twice as many as that coefficient. If there's one Panzer system, just to illustrate, if there's one Panzer and it has 12 missiles loaded, then with one salvo, roughly speaking, it can shoot down 12 drones. So you need to send 24 drones there, and then they'll accomplish the combat mission. But instead, they send out 5 at a time, and only in the information flow can Dasha and I confirm, yes, there was some drone flight somewhere. But what's the efficiency of that? That's what I'm saying. Even you are already clearly identifying this. Efficiency is important, and that's much more important than the mere informational message that someone flew somewhere or someone shot at someone. I mean, there's absolutely nothing military about this. There's a kind of theatricality to it. But actors have never won wars, believe me. Wars are won by military professionals who plan combat missions, allocate enough forces and resources for each mission to achieve a certain level of efficiency. But now, at least when it comes to target designation, some theatrical techniques are being used and nothing more. They make some announcements, collect money for tickets, and then everyone just scatters like gypsies, but only in the worst negative sense.
Roman Grigorievich, here's another batch of information. So, last night, the Lukavitsy aircraft plant in the Moscow region of Russia was attacked. This was confirmed by the National Security and Defense Council. It specializes in the production and modernization of fighter jets such as the MiG-29, MiG-31, and their modifications, and also participates in the development of new combat aviation models. In particular, projects for a next-generation frontline fighter. This is a quote, based on the MiG platform. It is also involved in the modernization cycle of Geran drones, wrote Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. What do you think?
Well, this just confirms our point. Look at what the CCD people are saying. The plant producing MiGs was attacked. As a military man, I immediately asked these people, these performers, you destroyed the plant. Will the MiGs still be able to take off or not? What will they answer? No, we didn't destroy it, but it was attacked. What's the point of this attack? So that in the information flow, the CCD people could say it was attacked. Now, if the CCD were to clearly confirm that after our drones attacked, the production cycle of the MiG-29 was halted there for a month or 2 or even 3 months, that would actually be some kind of efficiency indicator. But what do they say? Such and such plant was attacked. Some plant in Dubna was attacked. Something was attacked there. And what's the use of these attacks? That's what I'm talking about. So either keep quiet. I mean, don't go around saying that you're losers in that case. Just stay silent about the fact that you burned through several dozen drones, basically sending them straight into the enemy's air defenses. They achieved nothing. That's what the CCD clearly confirmed. So what kind of report do we get? A factory was attacked, and that's it. But the real report that should have come in is the factory was destroyed, the target was eliminated. And well, I understand why they can't say that, because you can't destroy a military factory with drones. Military factories are built to withstand nuclear strikes. How are you going to destroy it with a 50-kilogram drone? Next question, then why are you sending these drones to military factories at all? What's the point of these missions then? For what purpose? Just to dispose of the drones? Let me repeat, where can drones actually be sent? Because that's why things just explode and burn on their own. You can target above ground depots, not underground ones, but above ground. There are transshipment depots, for example, so-called transit warehouses. They are located at certain distances, like 500 or 700 kilometers away. So you can target those. You can also strike airfields, oil refineries, and that's it. Well, you can also operate in Crimea. Why is it possible to operate in Crimea? If you approach from the sea, it's inconvenient for them to shoot down because they're afraid that our Magura drones with anti-aircraft missile systems could take down their helicopters and planes. This has happened more than once. So there really aren't any more targets for drones. That's why our CPD guys and our politically motivated target spotters need to finally drop this whole act of showmanship. Let the military handle the targeting and target designation and allocate enough forces and resources to destroy the given target. And believe me, when the military does the calculations, there are certain coefficients they use. When they figure out how many drones need to be sent, say, to destroy that same target in Dubna, we won't hear anything more about it. What we'll hear is that 150 drones entered Dubna, and believe me, there will be nothing left there, at least for this particular task, but just to take them and burn them for no reason. What can I say? No matter how much we talk about this, and now everyone is starting to talk about it, our political leadership is giving themselves away too obviously. They're such great target designators, but it's not even about target designation anymore. They've started an interesting trend. They're approving targets. Some targets get approved, others don't. That's all there is to it. Those who didn't pay for the approved targets, well, they didn't get approved. Most likely those who did pay got their targets approved. Remember that old joke when a traffic cop checks your documents and keeps saying, not allowed, not allowed, not allowed, but then he sees a 10 spot and goes, oh, now it's allowed, go ahead. That's pretty much the same situation here. At least that's how it looks from an analytical perspective. As for how it really is, well, that's something counterintelligence should be dealing with, disposing of our drones wherever they end up.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Roman Grigorievich, given the aviation collapse, can we assume that there will really come a time when Russian Pantsir systems will shoot down their own civilian planes taking off from Sheremetyevo or Pulkovo?
Well, after a couple of planes go down from being hit by those Pantsirs, believe me, the third one just won't take off. They'll ground them and everyone will just sit tight and not go anywhere. They'll take the train up to the Urals, and after the Urals, then they'll fly. Well, how far is it to the Urals? 2,000 kilometers, yeah, they'll rattle along, it's not a problem.
The commander of the 155th Separate Marine Brigade, Colonel Ilyin Sergey, has been successfully demobilized. No details have been provided, but everyone is saying it's karma. The AFU, GOR, and SBU will find every war criminal no matter where they are. And the Chief of Staff of the 155th Separate Marine Brigade, Colonel Bashkadin Leonid. Roman Grigorievich, the floor is yours.
This was a strike on the headquarters of the 155th, and not just once, but a repeat strike as well. And at that time, almost the entire command of the 155th Brigade was wiped out, along with the former brigade commander, who is now also, you could say, the former deputy commander of the Black Sea Fleet of the Russian fleet. So, they took out a good dozen high-ranking officers back then. Actions like these of ours are very effective against the Russians. They have a deep bench. Everyone wants to become admirals, generals, and so on. So you could say we help the enemy climb the career ladder. But in reality, the 155th Brigade has already been wiped out 649 times. Near Vuhledar, they lost 2 entire formations. For example, the brigade commander who was at Vuhledar was taken out, and the new brigade commander who replaced him was just taken out near Kursk. This direction is very favorable for us because the Russians don't have a serious layered line of defense, specifically along the Kursk axis. Why not? Because they're extremely frightened idiots. They thought we wouldn't move toward Moscow. That is, in the Bryansk, Kursk, and Belgorod regions, there is no defensive line like, for example, the Surovikin line in Zaporizhia or Donbass, which was built up over 11 years. These extremely frightened idiots simply don't have it. They are covering this direction either with naval infantry or airborne troops. The main naval infantry units are the 8th 10th Marine Brigade, which is from Crimea, and the 155th Marine Brigade, which is from Vladivostok. There was also the Caspian Marine Brigade with several units from the Caspian region. Plus, there are the Ivanovo paratroopers. It turns out there are paratroopers in Ivanovo, or rather there used to be. Basically, they gathered up the last guys and sent them to Kursk. And now in Ivanovo, they'll have to, well, create an LGBT community because there are no men left. But something has to be done because the women of Ivanovo are incredibly beautiful. So this is the kind of attrition happening along the Kursk direction, specifically in the area where even the leadership of the 155th Brigade was taken out. That's Glushkovo, that's Lvov, that's Rilsk, that's Korenevo, that's Tetkino. In other words, these are the rear areas of the Russian corps, which is now still trying to make some moves in the Sumy direction.
Since January, Russia has lost 100,000 soldiers killed. Not total losses, but killed in action. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio after meeting with Lavrov. Give your assessment of this political statement.
Well, if Lavrov confirmed such losses to him, then we can believe it. At the very least, Rubio wouldn't just say something like that without reason. The question is, in what context is he saying all this? They are still trying to stop the fighting by giving up our territory. In other words, it's a capitulation scenario. Stopping the fighting at this point, according to Rubio and company and Trump as well, means the capitulation of Ukraine. That is, it implies Russian army control over the occupied part of Ukraine. That's a fifth, more than a fifth of the territory. Over 20% is already under occupation. So in this context, when fears are being stoked, well, then you can perceive and understand them as simply pushing us toward capitulation, toward the loss of territory, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and so on and so forth. I don't think there's any point in paying attention to such statements. Why? Because, well, Ukrainians won't stop. This concerns Ukrainians. Ukrainians, Cossacks, have never given up their land to anyone. Land and freedom, those are the main slogans of our grandfathers and great-grandfathers. So we will definitely carry out our combat mission all the way to the state border, just as they did. So after we reach the state border, destroy part of the Russian army by that time, God willing. And with Malyuk and Budanov's sanctions, destroy Russian oil refineries and the Russian economy collapses. That's when we'll talk about the losses of the Russian army and we'll confirm them. And believe me, they won't be in the hundreds of thousands. They'll be in the millions, Russians.
God willing, dear audience, once again, please like this video. Share your thoughts and analysis in the comments and write a few kind words to our duo with Roman Grigorievich. We work for you 3 times a week. This is very important. Roman Grigorievich regarding not stopping. So we've come to an important topic, the occupied Crimea. Now I will provide you with a series of information for analysis and discussion. 2 powerful explosions were reported in the Krasnoperekopsk district, according to subscribers of Crimean Wind. Next, a missile launch in the Jankoy district. At 11:25, a loud explosion was heard in the Krasnoperekopsk district. Russian air defense was active in Jankoy. The attack by Ukrainian drones is reported to be extremely powerful in the occupied Crimea. Right now, there is a massive traffic jam stretching 26 kilometers at the exit from Crimea before the Kerch Bridge. What do you say, Roman Grigorievich? Our attack on Crimea continues.
At the very least, I think our drone specialists have teamed up with the shawarma vendors. And can you imagine the kind of profits they're making right now with a 26-kilometer traffic jam at the exit from Crimea? And now even corn is being sold there. So this whole Crimean process, we understand it perfectly well. They're going to make a fortune, a real fortune. In other words, after getting a certain cut from these shawarma sellers, you can crank out more or at least buy more drones and send them wherever they're needed. But in reality, of course, there was an attack on Crimea last night. Drones were coming in, missiles were coming in too, right, Neptunes, but the Neptunes were intercepted. Russians on social media were freaking out at night, saying everything there would be wiped out. Not everyone. The main targets were the anti-aircraft missile systems. By the way, it was actually the air defense system that tried to intercept them, specifically the one located in Jankoy. Why is it always near Jankoy? We've talked several times about strikes near Jankoy. Why is it at that airfield? It's a tactical airfield, mainly for army aviation. Helicopters there rearm. So there is an air defense system stationed there, the S-300, S-400. Since we've already taken it out, they've set it up there again. And that's why people constantly hear approaches near Krasnoperekopsk and departures near Jankoy. It's the work of the Russian air defense, which covers the Kerch direction from the northwest. That's why it's very important for us not to slow down, to keep up the strikes at least every other night or every 2 nights. We need to hit the enemy's air defense, including in Jankoy, and wipe it out completely. That was the attempt, and today drones went in. I don't think this will be the last time. In other words, little by little, we're gradually getting closer to our main objective, the Kerch Bridge. And as for the 26 kilometers of traffic jams, well, that's sacred. They've been fleeced, they've been taken advantage of, they've been left out in the cold and so on. So at this point, these are already the Russians' problems. Did you know where you were going? You did. Then figure out how you're going to get out.
Getting out of Crimea, yeah, only by swimming, breaststroke, freestyle, whatever options you suggested.
Dog paddle.
Yes, dog paddle. Roman Grigorievich has already clearly laid out all the options in previous episodes, so check out the earlier episodes, Roman Grigorievich, and about Crimea as well. The cherry on top is that mobile service is down, cell phones, everything is out, and of course the Rashists are tearfully sending messages that nothing is working for them. Isn't that wonderful, right?
Well, the thing is, in this case, there are two options. Either write letters to your grandpa in the village or dig out your pages. Remember, that was a thing in the last millennium. They'll have to set up pager communication in Crimea. But how? Well, they won't be making calls while on a voyage anymore after all. Although, who knows? Russians, they can do the most random things.
I've prepared the following information for you as the cherry on top. Meanwhile, in Orsk, in Russia's Orenburg region, a mechanical plant is on fire. According to local social media, there are some serious explosions. I'm watching them now. The 8th workshop of the plant is on fire, supposedly due to the ignition of materials. The Orsk mechanical plant is a major Russian engineering enterprise that produces goods for the defense industry, including shell casings and components for multiple launch rocket systems. It also specializes in equipment for the oil and gas sector. Roman Grigorievich, well, the oil and gas sector sweetens the deal for us a little. The floor is yours.
Because our concerned citizens managed to accomplish several tasks at once. First, it really is a military facility. Second, it's an industry, including the oil and gas sector. And third, most importantly, as you noticed, our concerned citizens have revealed where the orcs' lair is. It's in Orsk. So, specifically there, that's where all the orcs are coming from to us, at least in terms of information. So, a big thank you to our concerned citizens. Really, thank you very much. Why? Because we can see their actions. They really are causing certain problems for the Russian economy. Things are burning, oil transfer mechanisms are burning at various levels. They're setting fire to pipelines and oil pumping stations. In Komsomolsk-on-Amur, they set fire to an oil refinery. So they're targeting the energy sector. And really all it takes is a single match. They set dry grass on fire where the pipeline runs, and that's it. Well, you can write off the pipeline, and especially the gas pipeline. So they're taking action. And they're also directly targeting enterprises, which in principle can also be put out of commission if you know how. And I'll say it again, there are plenty of people who care, because this war, the genocidal war of the Moscow Empire against Ukraine and Ukrainians, has already worn out all Russians. All the more so since we remember that there are more than 10 million ethnic Ukrainians in Russia alone, not to mention the dozens of states, dozens of republics and regional state entities that have now been practically conquered by this Moscow Empire, this Moscow Khaganate, and they, in the end, also want their freedom. In other words, this prison of nations must be destroyed, and it can be destroyed from within as well.
Roman Grigorievich, Russia may lose its only aircraft carrier, which has been under repair for 7 years. The repairs on the Admiral Kuznetsov have currently been suspended. Right now, the question is being decided whether to modernize it or send it for scrap. I would like Russia to lose all its fleets, the Northern, the Black Sea, and the Pacific. Roman Grigorievich, the floor is yours.
Well, as always, the Russians went about it the wrong way, as they say. When the task was set to create an aircraft carrier, the task itself was set incorrectly from the very beginning. They set the task like this: take a locomotive and turn it into an aircraft carrier. And that's exactly what they did. They took a locomotive and they took this boiler, a coal boiler, and based this aircraft carrier on that coal boiler. So of course it will smoke like a locomotive, but you can't really call that an aircraft carrier. They dragged it around, dragged it. Once it entered the Mediterranean Sea, smoked up all of Europe, and then everyone was laughing. All of Africa and all of Europe were laughing at this locomotive in the end. Even in England, when it passed through the strait, the English was sneezing, wondering what was going on. So they drove it back to Russia, and now they've decided, let's pull the locomotive back out of this aircraft carrier. At least it can haul some cargo on the railroad. So as always, like I said, Russians don't think with the right part, don't set goals with the right part, and obviously don't produce things with the right part either. Now, the most interesting part, they're going to try to scrap it. It would be better to sink it. Why? Because scrapping it is much more expensive than the value of the metal they'll get from it. But still, well, anyway, all right, let's not give the Russians any tips on how to do it better. Let them cut it up. Maybe they'll even carve a locomotive out of it.
Roman Grigorievich, Trump has announced that next week he will make an important statement regarding Russia. Most likely, the Senate will impose sanctions next week. Most likely, oil prices will drop sharply. Roman Grigorievich, considering this geopolitical situation, how might things change on the front lines? This is very important.
Well, so far it's just statements. Let's be clear. So far we haven't seen any real action. Yes, the rhetoric has changed. The rhetoric for us is basically fine, but it's still just rhetoric. There haven't been any actions yet. There is, let's say, only one positive point. Only after a serious negative, after Trump stopped supplying us with weapons, he has now slightly unblocked it, so to speak, and wants to look like a great winner. But in reality, of course, we have problems with the supply of American weapons, especially defensive ones. These are mainly missiles for Patriots, missiles for F-16s, for NASAMs. These are either HIMARS or PAC-3, PAC-2. So at the moment, the rhetoric is only, let's better analyze when there are real actions. That's what needs to be. What can be analyzed is if this goes through, if under the PDA program, we receive at least one batch from the new supplies. I mean, from the new program, there are still several $billion left. And Trump, in principle, could, without any problem, just by signing an order, give us equipment under this program. Let's wait for that. When that happens, then we can say that with Trump, it's not just rhetoric. His actions have changed as well. That's the first point. The second is that the purchase of weapons from America using the NATO budget is, again, a good topic for us in terms of action, but that hasn't happened yet either. Here, the issue is most likely connected to Germany's decision-making. Right now, we need to focus on Merz. Merz will be in charge of this process, and the purchases will be made for us using their own funds as well as European and NATO funds. So there are three sources here: German finances, EU finances, and NATO finances. These are different, distinct sources of funding, and with these funds, American purchased weapons could be supplied to us. Although, of course, it would be better for us to get European weapons so that they keep everything in Europe. There's an economic rationale here. So at the moment, we can only analyze the intentions of the American administration to address the shortage of equipment and ammunition in the Ukrainian army. The intentions are good, there's no question about that. The question is, let's wait for action.
Roman Grigorievich, to wrap up, Russia is facing a drone attack, but not from outside the country, rather from within its own territory. Sources from the VCHK Gubo channel reported that security forces in Moscow have been put on high alert due to possible attacks. All defense and shelter systems have been put on high combat readiness. FSB officers have been deployed to duty almost in full force.
Well, it makes sense for them to be afraid. Why? Because, as we've been saying for the second year now, you go to the market, buy an FPV drone, attach some kind of explosive to it, send it off, and complete a combat mission. When it comes to oil refineries, that's a whole different story. With a single grenade, you can burn down a casting plant if you know where to hit. With a single grenade, you can stop a steel plant, for example, by detonating it from an FPV drone or by blowing up the oxygen shop directly. So there are these critical points at every plant, at every facility, and those who care know them very well. And as for what mechanisms are used in these kinds of actions, well, each concerned individual chooses for themselves, mainly to avoid getting caught by the Russian FSB, Russian police, gendarmerie, call them whatever you like. And these are the mechanisms that are being used. Today, for example, we discussed how in Orsk, at the center of the Russian movement, in Orsk, a factory burned down, or at least a workshop. So in terms of preparation, they are doing the right thing. Yes, indeed, this process will intensify in the near future. It is already intensifying, but concentrating certain means of destruction in one place is very important for us. It's the same as with aviation, without drones concentrated in one spot. And right now, the best option for everyone who cares is to gather in Moscow as well. Moscow needs to be burned too. That is, Moscow and Muscovites, specifically those who make decisions, who practically drain all the resources from the rest of Russia, need to understand, they need to feel this war. And it's not just a war against Ukraine, it's also a war against Moldova, the Transnistrian Republic, a war against Georgia, as we've clearly seen, and the war in Syria. Wherever Russians go, wherever a Russian sets foot, it seems, some kind of conflict or war inevitably breaks out.
Burning Moscow, a perfect ending. Dear audience, Roman Grigorievich and I work together 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, for viewers all around the world on my YouTube channel, Daria Shaslivaya. Roman Tsvetan, a well-known analyst. Roman Grigorievich, thank you, and see you again on Monday.
Goodbye.